Humans have a profound need to make sense of our experience, and one of the primary ways we do that is through stories. When we think we're responding to a person, experience, or feeling, what we're usually really responding to is the story we're telling ourselves about that experience. And when we confuse interpretation with reality, we give our stories a degree of power and influence over us they don't deserve. My name is ScottRSwanson, and I love helping people develop fresh insight into the stories that guide their lives. Because insight brings choice, and choice empowers and frees. What stories we tell to interpret our experience matter. Doing a better job of interpreting what's going on around and inside us can make for a better life and a better world. Hi, welcome back to the podcast. This time I have for you an interview with Alex Howard. With a colorful and unique background spanning the globe, Alex is on a mission to make a vibrant impact. From an athlete to a website designer, from genetics research to building a children's charity, from personal struggle to wellness, Alex's journey has shaped her passion for coaching and transformation. Combining mindfulness, brain science, and coaching mastery, she empowers individuals to find connection, confidence, and spark for life. Alex is the founder of Mind Moved Alive and the Bright-Minded Community. She brings a wealth of expertise and dedication to her work as a certified transformational life and wellness coach. Beyond her professional roles, Alex is a wife, a mother of 2 boys, a relentless optimist, and a big-time believer in people and their boundless possibilities. I've put links to her website and these notes on Alex in the show notes for today's session. I hope you enjoy our conversation. My apologies up front for the sound quality on my end, which did not work out that well. So please bear with the audio on this recording and enjoy. Alex Howard, welcome, and thank you for being on the podcast with me today.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate the invitation.
You go by both Alex and Alexandra interchangeably?
I think that there are officially 2 people who call me Alexandra, and that would be my mother and my brother.
When they're mad at you?
Yes, I get the full name from start to finish. So I think Alex is what 99.5% of the population call me. So Alex is perfect.
Okay. And you always use Alexandra in, like you have Alexandra on your name card here and in your website.
Yeah, it just feels more like complete, you know? It's like my full name. So
Right.
Alexandra Howard. Otherwise, I've had in the past, I've had people think I'm a guy. I've gotten in the habit of saying Alexandra when I write, so people don't think they're speaking to a man.
Alex, you and I know each other through a program that we both invested in to help us with our online business. And over the course of the number of calls we've been on together over the last couple of years, I have been, as I think probably everybody is when they meet you, captivated by your spirit and your smile and your exuding positive energy and all those wonderful gifts. I'm not saying that to blow smoke, but this feels to me like an integral part of how you show up in the world. And I wonder if that has always been true for you, or if this is something you have grown into through the years.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think so. Yeah, thank you for the question, and thank you for noticing my energetic qualities. I appreciate that. I do think that my natural spirit, my natural way of being, my natural way of showing up in the world is indeed the way that you describe it. But I will say that there was a chunk of time in my life where that got significantly knocked out of my sails. The wind got knocked out of my sails, shall we say. And I did not experience that at all. And I think that was definitely a very different experience to to this experience here where I'm, able to show up with that vibrance and the energetic quality. So yeah, I do think that there was a chunk of time in my life where there was some significant happenings where I did experience a very different set of inner and outer, well, things, whatever you want to call it. And at the time, there was a lot that was happening at the time. Things that kind of came out of left field, or it felt like it came out of left field, which I think often happens where we sort of go through life and then all of a sudden, we kind of wake up one day and we go, Jesus, what the heck? What's happening? Where am I? I don't feel good. And you realize you're not where you want to be at all. And I think it's like for me, it was like a slow burn. It's interesting when you're on that kind of treadmill, so to speak, whatever that is, you don't always notice that you're on it until there's a moment, usually, where your body just screams out or your mind screams out in some way. And then you're like, whoa, okay, noted. Like this, the cry, the scream becomes so loud that you can't ignore it anymore. Yeah. And I think that's probably that is what happened.
So for you, when that moment came, what's the next thing that happens?
Well, I think for me, it's funny when you're on that treadmill, whatever that is, I think that there's an enormous amount of fighting that's happening and resistance and tightness and holding on and grasping and clinging. And, that treadmill is just very tight. And then all of a sudden, this moment happens and you just simply can't hang on anymore. It's almost like there's this surrender that happens where you just fall. But a falling that it's hard to describe because it's sort of like I look back at it now and I say, okay, it sort of felt like a really deep surrender where I just, like everything just shut down and almost like a numbness, like I couldn't feel, I couldn't.
Like emotionally shut down?
Just everything.
Everything.
I couldn't, it was just like a shutdown. It was like, no more.
Right.
No more. And that was it. So for me, the next step was just a surrender that I didn't really realize perhaps at the time. And it wasn't a choice that I had made. Like, I am going to surrender now. But I think that my body chose it. My body said no. And my mind, you have reached your limit and you cannot continue. And so I'm going to make a choice for you. So there was like a surrendering on some level that perhaps wasn't as choiceful, but I think that moment was very pivotal. It was a turning point for me, for sure, because from that moment on, I decided that I was never going to not exercise my choice, the muscle of choosing, because I didn't even know that I had that much choice before. I think that's such an interesting concept and idea that we can go through life without really knowing that we have choice. Because we feel like we're just in this cave and it's dark and we can't really see. There's no windows. So like, where's the choice? I don't know. It just feels.
That's fascinating to me because as I read your bio, you grew up with like a pretty privileged life, traveling around and all sorts of opportunities. And I can imagine that if there was a person who felt like they had choice, it would be someone who had lived the life you lived.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not saying that there wasn't choice because I think I've always had, there has been choice. But, when you kind of go down these rabbit holes in the mind and it's a perceived experience, like you just feel locked in your lane and your path and whatever you're dealing with in that moment. And it just seems like it's like I don't know if people who are listening or will relate to this, but it's like you're just on this path and one thing's just leading to another and you're just kind of on it, but you don't really know how bad it is, I think. And no one's telling you, or they are, but you're not listening. you're kind of not, you're just, it's like a very interesting experience, that one, where you're here, but not really here. I mean, it really is like an autopilot mode. It's like you just go through the motions. Like there's no presence, there's no joy really. I mean, that experience I definitely can relate to. And just the deep not wanting to be there, like the wishing, the longing, the like every morning you wake up and you're like, oh, what else? What else? Like how can I break out of this? I don't know how. And I think that experience can snowball if you stay in that for so long. And then, I mean, you pick up bad habits. Like I did that, right? I picked up terrible habits. I picked up smoking. My husband, he started drinking. Like, you pick up these habits along the way to help cope or to help soothe or to comfort. And then those habits turn into addictions. And that's a whole other situation. But that's kind of and you don't think it's bad. You're like, yeah, it's whatever, it's fine. You move along and you're just, these are all little vices and you're like, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. But then you wake up one day and you're like, it's not fine. And it's all a little bit secret and underhanded. And it's like you're justifying it all. It's okay. But none of it was okay at all.
I think that's such a great description of my sense of what a lot of people experience in terms of the ability to go through life kind of half asleep.
Yeah.
Right? We get into patterns, we get into routines, we have stories we tell ourselves about responsibilities or what success looks like or what the good life is, those sorts of things. And we pay a price for that, right? We sacrifice for that.
Yeah.
And we don't, there's such small sacrifices. There's such small, it's like that really cheap subscription that, you're only paying, $2 or $5 a week. You don't even realize you're paying it until you look at the Visa bill at the end of the year and you look at how much it cost you,
That's right. Yeah.
Suddenly the $5 coffee at Starbucks becomes $1,000 habit or something when you extrapolate. And so we kind of fall asleep to ourselves, and then we're looking for ways to, I don't know if this language fits for you, but almost medicate ourselves to save ourselves from our own personality.
Yeah.
To look at one's psyche all the time in that unproductive way is painful.
Yes.
We look for ways to get out of that. I'm curious, something you said a while ago, that it was your body that told you. And I know you're a dancer, and I think you were an athlete as well. And I wonder if there's something about that for you, it was your body that gave you the message.
Yeah.
As opposed to, you had a thought one day or you had a feeling or something. Do you have any sense of that
Totally. Yeah. I mean, my body has always been, I've always been in deep connection with my body, quite frankly. Yeah. I was an athlete growing up. I've done lots of different things, and my body is very much a channel that I honor and I respect very much. And so it was interesting that my body told me that it was done. And it was such a body thing. It really was. Like my body really, really spoke to me. And I mean, I couldn't move. I mean, I was done. It was so fascinating. And even if I'd wanted to, I wasn't able to. So I do think that there's a fascinating connection there that I think at the time, I don't think I was conscious around that. I don't think there was a consciousness around how my body spoke to me, but I could feel that it was completely and utterly depleted and drained, and that I wasn't taking care of it at all. There was this real sense that there was no care. I mean, I was half a pack a day or something smoking, like it was crazy. And it went totally against sort of this image, this self-image, or this image of Alex, right? Who's healthy and an athlete and takes care of herself and does all these great things and can do whatever, right, with her body. Like I can play tennis and dance and this and that. Like it just went against all of that. And for me, that was where I felt a lot of shame, right? Because I'd never not taken care of my body in such a terrible way. And yet at the same time, it was like I couldn't take care of it. I don't know. It was like I didn't know what else was on the menu of choice. See, that's the thing. Like I feel like even with the people that I work with now, it's like you don't know what to replace it with. And if you don't know what to replace it with, you're not going to replace it. You know, and so because you need it. So I really struggled at the time. I didn't have another menu of choice. And I think I could feel that. Like I could feel that I was stuck in this menu. And I know now why I smoked. I smoked to breathe, which is so interesting.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't breathing. I had this short breath. I didn't know how to breathe. And I think that's an experience that a lot of people have. They forget they have breath, and breath will counter anxiety. It will counter so many of these states that we enter. And I did not know how to breathe. So I needed a cigarette to get that relaxation response.
Right.
And so every time I took a breath in and a breath out, my whole system relaxed. And it was the only time I could relax was when I had a cigarette.
Yeah.
And I think that's fascinating.
That is totally fascinating. And how long did it take you to put those two things together?
Recently.
Oh.
So after I was like, okay, done, enough. I'm not doing this. This is I'm done. Like it literally was overnight for me. So everything just collapsed, boom, done. And then the next day I just decided I'm not okay. That's the first thing I declared out loud, which again goes against my self-image because I'm always okay. Alex is okay. Alex is great. Alex can do everything. Alex is awesome. Like I was like, nope, I'm not any of those things and I am not okay. So that was the first thing I had to accept and say, that was hard. And then the second thing is I need help. And that's also a really difficult thing to say. Because again, when to get my self-image, I'm good. I got this. I'll figure it all out. I don't need anything. I don't need anyone. I got this, right? I was just like problem solver, fixer, rescuer. I got it all. Like I can whip out whatever I need. So, that was a really tough thing for me as the, CEO of the rescue club, that I needed help.
So was there a direct line between that whole experience and you becoming a coach?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big time. The first thing I did was, and I remember this distinctly, so I woke up the next day, I threw my pack of cigarettes out, and I've never smoked since. And it wasn't easy because let me tell you, quitting smoking, when you are addicted to smoking, it's one of the hardest things to do. It's really hard. So, so that's the first thing. And then I remember calling this Zen master, like this guy, just looked him up online. And I was like, I need somebody. I just need somebody I just need to start. I don't even know what I need. I just need somebody. That's all I kept saying, somebody. So I looked up this guy and he was this Zen master. He was a meditation guy and he ended up living down the street from me. And I spoke to him on the phone and I said, I'm in trouble. I need help. And he says, come on down, 2:00 today, come down my house. I open my doors and I have a meditation for people in the community. And I was like, okay, this is a little weird, but okay. So I got in the car and I drove down, and lo and behold, there he was with his wife, and he had about 6 shoes in the front hallway. And I thought, okay, there's people here. Okay, this is too creepy. And then, he had this beautiful 1.5-hour meditation. First time I ever meditated, first time I ever noticed that I had breath was in that moment, that day. And I sat there and he looked at me and he said, have you ever done this before? I said, no. Sit in the corner and just be silent. And I was like, okay. And I swear to God, that was the worst 1.5 hours of my life. I don't even, it was like, it was like I had an entire population of a country in my head. Like it was so loud. My brain and my mind was so loud. And I was equally terrified and intrigued. And from that moment on, I kept coming back.
Yeah.
And I was like, dang, girl, you have a mind? What? I was like, I had no, and up until that moment, I knew I had a mind, but I didn't know I had a mind. Like, I didn't know that all of this was happening in my mind.
So what do you mean when you say that you didn't know you had a mind? What is a mind?
I don't know. I didn't know that I had this landscape, that you could train it, that you could notice what was happening, that there was this level of precision that you could master or tap into, that you could understand, that you could sit in stillness, and that you could track and notice where everything's moving and what's happening and how it's all going. And I had no concept of that. I didn't know. I mean, I knew I had a brain, I knew I had a mind, but I didn't realize or have a sense for how powerful this mechanism is and how it all works. I had no idea. When I was younger, I just did stuff. Like I didn't know that my mind was as powerful as it was. I didn't have consciousness around that for a very long time. I didn't seem to consider this amazing thing we have here. And so I became incredibly curious and intrigued about mind.
So I think I can see now how you came up with this business called Mind, Mood, and
Yeah.
Love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from there, I started training with him, so to speak. He was a beautiful man, and I would go there once or twice a week for an hour and a half, and he would train me and he would teach me, and we would have these beautiful discussions. And then I went into psychotherapy. So I became a patient of a very interesting gentleman, and I was in a dynamic group. I was in a group of about 12 of us, and I would show up every week for 2 hours in this group of 12. And we would just talk about everything, which was equal parts terror and intriguing and deeply, deeply fascinating. Because that's where I learned that we're all the same. And it's where I heard the great range of experience, human experience in that room. And I realized that we are all in the same soup. There are no exceptions to that rule.
What's the soup we're all in?
The soup of life, the soup of human experience. It's a universal experience. I mean, we all think we're so different and we're all experiencing things differently, and we're not. They're just different applications of the same themes. But the themes are it's very simple, but there's so many applications, and it can go into so many just different areas. But I really, at that moment, realized like we're all experiencing life in more similarly than we are differently. And that was really profound for me.
Think about how in our culture we are still to some extent encouraged to cultivate our sense of our own individuality, our own uniqueness, our own specialness. And, there's all sorts of debates back and forth around that. But what I hear you pointing to is this common human experience that we share.
Yes.
But it's like we don't know we're sharing it.
It's true.
And so we look at, glossy people or successful people, however you define that. And I, even at this stage in my life with the work that I've done, it's easy for me, it's possible for me to look at those kind of people and somehow think that there is something qualitatively different about their take on the human experience than mine. And sometimes I have to remind myself, there's this sense that there is this common humanity that we share, which is a way into relationship. What kind of people do you work with in your coaching practice?
Um, I think probably very similarly in a way, people who are feeling like they are going through the motions, they are on autopilot, they're not vibrant, they're not feeling alive, they're not feeling joyful, they're not feeling in flow, they're not feeling their bodies, they're not feeling anything really. And they're just like, ugh, what is, and maybe they are picking up vices and they're picking up bad habits along the way and they're drinking too much or they're, engaging in things that they prefer not to. And they just want to feel, you know, this word resilience keeps coming up because I think I used to have a very different understanding of resilience. And, I help people really build a kind of resilience that is more about bouncing in than it's about bouncing back. Because I always thought that was so interesting. I'm like, people are like, oh, you're so resilient, you're bouncing back. I'm like, back to where? To what? The growth that I've had is really about bouncing in. And I was able to bounce in and I could hold, my capacity to hold increased significantly. I could hold everything. I could hold it all. Whereas before I was like, don't want that. Don't want that. I'm going to run away from this too. Yeah, prefer not to have that either. Thanks. I just want this. This is all I can handle. Everything else can just go away. And I realized, like, in this process of learning and growing, that in fact, it's not how it works. It's like, and in that room where I was with all those people was also where I learned like a deep and profound and wise bouncing in. And it all is part of who you are. And when we exile parts of us, like we tend to do, which is what I was doing, it's not going to go well when you're sending parts of you to solitary confinement with no boat and no bridge and no access. It's going to bite you in the ass at some point. Resilience to me, it's like this deep bouncing in and being with, like a radical being with, and a radical holding all of it with acceptance and openness and curiosity and love, right? And that is a process in and of itself. But that's what I do. That's what because that's where vibrance lives, right? It's when we're not crapping on ourselves and beating ourselves up for this and creating conditions all the time around what's okay and what's not okay and blah, 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 and setting all these parameters and expectations without even noticing that we're doing it. Just the releasing, complete releasing, and then an allowing of experience as it's unfolding, just an allowing and allowing and allowing and allowing and a releasing, surrendering control. It is such a hard practice, simple in theory, but difficult in practice. But I believe that that's where true vibrance, like when I dance, that's where it's a complete and utter surrender. It's a bouncing in and it's an allowing, right? And it's just this beautiful ebb and flow without any conditions placed on it. Like whatever it is, it is.
A few minutes ago, when you're talking about how we exile parts of ourselves, and I have found in my own practice, one of the modalities that I use, the internal family systems, has the stuff that I have seen happen in people when they have a chance to befriend those parts of themselves.
Yeah.
That are doing the best they can.
Totally.
Based on what they know.
Yep.
And bringing self energy to that and understanding and compassion, but also kind of a sense of boundaryness.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting that there was so much shame around some of the things that I did? And I think that, shame there's the great quote that's like, it's basically like destroys all joy, right? It's the killer of all aliveness is this shame that we hold. And it's so interesting because I used to have shame around smoking. Like that was the worst thing that I could think to tell anybody about me. The worst thing in the world. Like if anyone knew that I smoked, oh my God, that would be the end of me. And then all of a sudden that curtain started to lift because I started to understand why I was doing it and actually that it was in service of me at the time. Thank
Yeah.
God I smoked. I can't even imagine if I didn't smoke. Like, what would I have done?
Suffocated.
Yeah, like I needed something. I needed a functional coping strategy in that moment.
Yeah.
I needed something and I chose to smoke. And that was why I did it. It wasn't because I was trying to kill my lungs or destroy myself or, it was genuinely in service of survival, like just staying alive. But for the longest time, I was so in judgment of myself. Oh my God. I was in judgment of myself and I judged myself deeply for therapy. That was another one. Don't tell anyone you're in therapy, Alex, because then it means there's something wrong with you and you can't cope with life and you suck. Right? Like I couldn't imagine telling my family. I couldn't.
That's
I was like, I was the secret. I had these little secrets because I had exiled all these parts of me that were like, nope, you go over there. You're not allowed to play at the table. You don't have the right to speak up. So when I started to release all of that and be like, yeah, and I'm so much better for it. I'm not smoking anymore. I'm going to, I was so much better for it. And I started to become really proud of it. So I started owning it.
Hmm.
It's like, yes, this is what I'm doing because I am committed to being happy and joyful and resilient and all the things that I know I am. Not that I want to be, that I know I am. So it was like this deep reclaiming of myself, but like on steroids. So, that's the best when you start to see it as something that is just a deep claiming, like an owning of yourself and that you deserve to have that you and it's your right. It's who you are. And it's all there. It's all available. It's all available right now. And that's the thing. When I started connecting that dot, I'm like, that is so cool.
Thank you for going into such lucid detail around the experience of welcoming home those exiles and making a conscious effort to choose to live with another set of narratives, another set of stories about what's in and who's in and the rest of it. When we were talking about having this conversation, when we were talking about my work with men and some of the men who you work with, and we talked about aliveness and resilience and flexibility and all those things. And but there was another pattern. There was another energetic move that you have noticed, not only in guys and in people, but certainly in the men that you have worked with around this kind of self-acceptance or welcoming of the complexity of our experience.
Yeah.
Talk about what you find in this pattern, this back and forth, this energetic move that so many men you encounter are making.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, if I was to go back in time and re-examine my relationship with my husband, I would say that part of what was happening and part of the breakdown for us to some extent was that I think that I was a bit of an emotional compass for him. And what I mean by that is that his movements and how he lived his life or moved through his days or whatever was dependent on how I was feeling and how I was and what drama happened in that day. And I think that a lot of men might have the same experience to some extent where they're not necessarily feeling like they can own their own experience. They're there to make sure that everybody's okay around them. And there's this expectation, in a way, that the guy is going to take care of and provide for and all this kind of stuff, right? Like culturally, that's kind of how we've been conditioned. So it's, there is this sort of like, well, if she's okay, then I can be okay. Then it's okay for me to be okay. And I realize, and this is where I think it was very important what happened, because what I realized is that I was putting an enormous burden on him. If there was a problem in my life, he was the one that got to hear about it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, right? So he's kind of like my dumping ground without really noticing that that's what I was doing. But it was what I was doing.
And are you thinking at the time, are you conscious at the time of the extent to which his okayness is wrapped up in yours?
No,
No.
because at this point, it's all about me.
Okay. So you're just sharing.
Let's be frank. It is all about me. And this is where...
Well, hang on a second, because that could sound like an arrogant, egocentric Alex who doesn't give a flying what about anybody else.
Well, I think to some extent.
Okay.
I think I was a little bit not intentionally, not like, oh, it's all about me and Alex is first, but
right.
it was more like, no, I have a problem. I have the problem. Like, you need to listen to me because I'm suffering. Like, I have a problem, and I'm in, but the problem with what was going on, it was constant, and it was always around my family. It was a constant thing, a constant theme. And I remember very distinctly after, everything, the shit kind of hit the roof, and I started doing a bit of my own work. I was like, oh my God, this guy has no space. He's got no space to move. Like, I take up a lot of space. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I think I did. I took up a lot of space with my problems, my dramas, my things, my. And I'm not saying that this is the experience across the board. I'm just saying this was my experience.
Yep.
And what I had to do is to really take responsibility for that piece. To say, you know what? This was not on you. Like, you did not. And guys are fixers. And this is really important because he was like, well, my job is to fix this then. I got to fix it. And I got to go in and I got to fix it. And if I don't fix it or I don't show that I'm fixing it, then I'm not a good guy, or I'm not a good husband, or I'm not a good father, or whatever. Yeah. And I did not have a clue about any of this, like zero. And so, but I think in a way I was like, yeah, you do need to just listen to me because I have a problem. Like, clearly I have a problem, and who else am I going to talk about it with? So you need to be there. So I think in my mind, I was like, this is what it is. But after, I'm telling you, there was a moment where I went to him and I actually apologized. I said, I'm really sorry. This scenario with my family and all the drama, it's been going on a really long time. And I'm really sorry that we talk about it all the time. That shouldn't be the way that our relationship is. And if I need to talk about it, I should go somewhere else, which is what I was doing. I was going to a therapy group. I was going and talking about it somewhere else. So I could come back and we could talk about other things. We could talk about our relationship and what we wanted to do. And like, I could ask him how he was, which I don't think I did for a decade. I never asked him how are you? Tell me about your day. What's happening in your life?
So it sounds like you were unconscious about the extent to which he would be owning or feeling a need to fix or somehow manage your emotional state.
Yeah.
Was he unaware of the internal drive within him to do that?
Yes, he was unaware. And what ended up happening was I took up smoking and he took up drinking.
Right.
Because it was just too much. All of it was too much. And we were bringing it to the table in the wrong way.
So there's this way in which he knows that he is supposed to take care of you and your well-being is connected to his efficacy as a man. Yeah. And at the same time, he doesn't know that.
That's right. And then on top of that, all of his stuff, because he's got stuff too.
Sure.
So he's got all of his stuff going on that I have zero concern about.
Because you're all wrapped up in you.
I'm all wrapped up in me. I'm like, okay, this is stories about me. Okay, so we're going to keep it on me. But again, it's not like a narcissistic thing.
No,
It's just,
it's a naivete.
yeah, it just wasn't consciously, I was just used to it, and also programming. Like, you just get used to these reels, these
Right.
scripts, and you just go, and it's just coming back, coming. Even to this day, I have to be very careful. I have to be very intentional. And I have to remind myself that there's a time and a place. And do I really need to talk about this right now? No, I don't. I'm okay. So I took responsibility for that. And I'm not saying that I was the one, it was my fault and everything, but that's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that we each can take responsibility for our parts. And I think when I did that, there was an opening. There was an opening in our communication, in our healing, because he didn't feel like he failed and that he's a big disappointment and that he's just, alcoholic and he sucks and he's an addict and all of these things. It's like, no, you did that for a reason. The same reason I picked up smoking. Like, those are behaviors we pick up to help us cope with something that's beyond our scope of capacity.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened. And it caused a lot of hurt and a lot of pain. Let me tell you, like, it was a really, big deal. And I'm not trivializing any of that. But I will say that the fact that we were able to take responsibility for our parts in it and declare that and state it and own it and claim it, I think saved our relationship, because there was no blame. It was very interesting. Like, it was hurt and pain, but not as much blame. Maybe at the beginning, because it's a big kind of explosion, but then it sort of became more of like a journey of sorts for each of us, and we each were kind of on our own paths of healing, and we were able to do that in our own ways. And I think what's really interesting, going back to the man topic, what I realized and noticed is that what Tom needs is very different than what I need. And I think that what I thought was what I needed was what he needed too. So I started to understand, as my next step, that his needs are very different, and that's okay. And I need to respect that and know what that is. And I need to ask him, what do you need? When do you need it? How do you need it? The same way I get to ask myself that question, and he has to ask it of me. Like, we are very different. And so what I learned about him, and what I've been learning about a lot of men that I work with, is this need for space and for reset and for recovery. And I think as you get older, I think all of us, that need for spaciousness increases, and the need to have built-in recovery and built-in reset. And a man will do that very differently than women. Women, sometimes reset means having a chat with another woman, like with their girlfriends. We go out and we chit chat and we do our thing. For a man, it's different. It's more quiet. Like, I just don't want anyone around. I just want a moment of peace and quiet. So I noticed that it can look very different. And sometimes, that can be a little bit, like, if you don't understand that, then you can get into trouble too, because women are like, well, you're not spending time with me. What's wrong with, what's wrong?
Right.
But I think that's where we start to understand what each one needs. And that for me was a huge aha moment. And allowing him, sometimes he needs a whole day of silence. No speaking, like a retreat day. And I'm like, okay, noted. So it'll just be a quiet day. And he's better for it. He's just a better human and a better dad and a better husband and a better boss and all that stuff. So yeah, there was a great learning there around honoring our needs, and then a deep respect for what that is. I go dancing by myself, and that's what I need, and that's what I love. And he's like, great, go enjoy it, have a blast. And he's so supportive and he loves it, so it's like, it's healthy.
It also requires each of you and so in this case, Tom, to know what it is he needs,
Yes. And
which
that
is
was a process.
not
Yes.
okay. That's because that's not a
That's
given
right.
with
And that's right.
with guys.
Yes.
I mean, and some women, and there's some guys who are very self-aware around that kind of stuff. So we're broad generalizations here, but without sort of infringing on Tom's own story or privacy, is there, or maybe as you look at him and group him together with some of the other guys you've worked with, what have you noticed about the process of men connecting with an awareness of their own needs?
I think it takes time. It takes a lot of time. That's the first thing I'll say. It's not something that happens overnight. It's a long kind of process. And I don't know if it's like a safety thing. Like, is it really safe to go and do my own thing? Like, am I going to get in trouble somewhere along the line? Like, if I really lean in and do this, like, I don't know if it's that, but I just notice that or I don't know. And that is true, because like for Tom, he didn't know what was his without being mine as well.
Yep.
And I think that's why, right? When I say he was like, I was his emotional compass, like I really was. Like, it was like, okay, where's Alex now today? Is everything okay? Okay, great. And if she's not okay, then I go there and then make sure she's okay. And then if she's okay, then I'll come back over here. But he was not rooted in himself, I wouldn't say. And he kind of grew up like that too, right? He grew up without having that like core rooting of like, you do you. And I think that might happen a lot for men, especially the ones I work with. Like, they grow up with all these expectations of who they should be, and they spend their whole lives trying to live up to that. And then they get to a certain point and I'm like, damn it, I don't think I want to do that anymore. Like, that does not sound fun at all. So their success paradigms don't include interests and hobbies and all these fun things that you get to do, and like connecting with other guys and talking about intimate things. And so it's very rare for me to work with a guy who is like, wow, he's just explored everything. And it is more often than not, it's like, I don't know. Like, okay, let's test this out. And it's a little scary, usually.
What do you think is scary about it?
Gosh, I don't know. I think a lot of fear of failure, because I think it's built in to the programming.
Yeah.
Like, what if I fail? What if I suck at this? What if I'm not great at it? What's everyone going to think? Because ultimately, guys supposed to be successful at all costs. And if you're not a man, right? It's like, that's a lot of pressure. So I think for a man to just do something just for the sake of it, with no outcome and no expectation and no whatever and this and that, and I just get to whip it out and just show it out, like, I don't think that's part of the conditioning. So it's very interesting to get the guys to kind of just relax into this space and take up that space and do it without their significant others or their wives, and just say, I'm doing this, I'm going, and just set those boundaries for themselves. And Tom does that now. Like, he's into fitness and he loves learning about it. He's got a really deep, inquiring mind, and he studies all of it. And that's what he loves. He loves to study. He loves to understand the body. Like, it's a real pursuit for him. And he's developed that as his passion. And that only happened in the last few years.
I'm really interested in what you said about encouraging these men to take up space, because, we live in a time in Western culture where there's a lot of discourse and even social policy around, historically, traditionally, how much space men have taken up in the public sphere, at any rate.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't dismiss that at all. So what do you think about that? Is it the case that whether it was done by, social convention or biology or whatever it is, to the extent that men have taken up social space, they haven't taken up personal space? Like, what do you think's going on here?
Yeah.
And you might disagree with my analysis, but I'm just thinking about, we live in this time where it's like the whole gender politics thing is really fraught. And so to talk about how men can increase their own health by taking up more space.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I don't know. I mean, I think there is some part of me that I notice and I feel a sense of danger. Like that's why I say this, the safety, right? There is some part of the man that I feel, the ones that I work with, there's a trepidation, like there's a feeling of non-safety that's attached to that. It's not like a yay, let's do this. And there's just something, and it's so nuanced, but it's there. And I think that has been such a narrow lane to some extent around what's allowed, what's not allowed. And I think for men now, I think it's tough. I think it's a little tough being a guy right now. There's a lot going on. There's been a lot going on. And, and I'm pro woman, like I really am. I love my girls, but I'm also pro man. Because I feel like in a way that there's been almost a shrinking of the man to some extent rather than an expanding. And I feel like if we're going to really be in relationship, like true relationship, it has to include both the man, the female, everyone's in between, like, all of it, we all have to show up, the rules have to be the same for everybody in a way. And I just wonder to some extent whether the man, I'm not a man, so I don't know, but I'm just going to share, like, whether there's been a little bit of like a hit, and I'll hear it a lot, like, oh, well, there's this and there's that. And there's just a bit of a disempowerment. I don't know if you feel that at all in some way, but it's nuanced, like it's very, very subtle.
Yeah.
There's something there that I'm like, oh boy. And it doesn't feel totally on par for me right now.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why I have a bit of a soft spot for guys, because I'm like, okay, come on now. Like we got it. We can, there has to be a balance and a symmetry and a synergy from my perspective. There has to be that. And it's not just women power at all costs or whatever else power at whatever cost. Like it has to be the whole, like we have to bring the whole up.
Yeah. Well, it's like, when you were talking earlier about those parts of yourself that you exiled as being unacceptable and unwelcome.
Yes.
I think that works at the collective level as well.
Yeah.
Maybe all or most cultures do this, I don't know, but to the extent that the culture has tended to privilege certain people in other ways over others, and it's understandable that there's a desire to correct that, to bring people back in line, but not in line, but like to bring people back into the circle. And when in the process of doing that, we begin to then exile other people.
Yeah. That's right.
Kind of end up in a similar situation.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I believe about privilege is that it is invisible to those who possess it.
Right.
So to the extent that one has privilege, until that's made evident, it just feels like normal.
Mm-hmm.
So you have this, broadly speaking, again, it's not true for all of us, but you have this gender that's been socialized, as you say, around your responsibilities to take care of other people, your responsibilities to take care of your family, at least physically and financially, and maybe even emotionally in terms of your partner. And so that's your job. You do that job, and you will have done your job well. And then to be told that, well, actually, you're the problem. Well, I was just trying to take care of my family and do what you told me I was supposed to do, and now you're telling me I'm the problem. Yeah. So I can see how some men end up feeling like, you know what, it doesn't matter what I do wrong.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
Why even bother?
Exactly. Indifferent and apathetic and in the middle.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's unsafe.
Yeah.
It's unsafe on this side and it's unsafe on that side.
Yeah.
And so I might as well just stay right here.
Or to go to the other side and say, well, it's actually women are the problem. It's actually feminists that have messed everything up, right? Yeah. Like there's so many ways that we can slice and dice and demonize each other
Yes.
in an effort to try and assert our own humanity. But how do we do that without doing it at the expense of the
Yeah,
humanity of all of
that's
us?
right. And I think again, it comes back to responsibility. It's just your own responsibility. You have the right to just to own and claim yourself. Everyone does.
Right.
In whatever way that is, right? In whatever form that is. And that's the opportunity and the gift. And whatever that looks like, you get to do that, whether you're a man or female or whatever. Like it's everybody's right.
Yeah.
And when we do that, everybody wins.
When we collectively create space for everyone to do that.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And when we all are claiming that core essence, whatever that is, and we allow each other to do that wholly and fully, I mean, it's a utopia. I don't think it's, like, it's probably never going to happen, but that I believe. And that's the work I engage in. I just say, listen, like because you feel better. You feel better, you are better, you show up better. We have this one life to live. That's it. So you have, do the best that you can with it. Enjoy it as much as you can. Really enjoy it. Be joyous. And if you're not enjoying it, then what's the point? Like truly, if you're just going through the motions your whole life, I mean, what a tragedy.
Alex, I think that's the final word.
Well, thank you. I've been
Thanks for doing this.
We've been on for a while, yeah. Hopefully sharing something of value. I don't know. Maybe not.
Well, if it's of no value, everybody's turned it off by now.
Exactly. Everyone's like, I'm out.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's been wonderful. Yeah, it's good to talk about these things because, again, it's how we realize we're all in the same soup. And I think it's important.
Well, I appreciate you taking so much time out of your afternoon to come and do this with me.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it.
Take care. And I'll put information, by the way, in the show notes about where people can get a hold of you and your website, and probably put something in the outro as well, just so that people know where to find you.
Awesome.
Right. Thanks, Alex.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Personal Story Coach podcast. What are you taking away with you that can help you change the way you think about your life? I help people, mostly men, gain insight into their current stories and practice telling ones that better align with their purpose and principles. If you'd like to know more about what I'm working on, go to personalstorycoach.com. There you can subscribe to my blog, see my menu of offerings, and sign up for my mailing list. Until next time.